On a Saturday morning in July 1998, a 5-year-old girl ran into a cluster of trees at the edge of a playground while her mother watched. She was chasing after a ball. When the mother followed just 20 seconds later, she found the ball lying on the ground, but her daughter had vanished. 11 years would pass before anyone discovered what happened in those brief moments. This is the story of Samantha Miller and how a small Indiana town learned that danger doesn't always look threatening. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary summer day. Sometimes it steals a child away in less time than it takes to pour a glass of juice. Ridgemont sat in the farmland of central Indiana with a population of 4,200. A town where the hardware store on Main Street still knew everyone's name, where the diner served the same blue plate special every Thursday, where Friday nights brought half the town to high school football games and parents believed their children were safe because everyone knew everyone, and bad things happened somewhere else. The Miller family lived on Oak Street in a small yellow house 2 blocks from Ridgemont Elementary. Laura Miller was 29, a nurse at the county hospital. She kept her light brown hair short for practical reasons. She had warm hazel eyes and steady hands at work that shook when she worried about her children. David Miller was 31, worked construction, had calloused palms and a back that ached most nights, but his smile came easily when he walked through the door and saw his family. He'd grown up in Ridgemont, married the girl he met at the county fair when they were both 17. They had 2 children and a life that felt solid even when money was tight. Jake was 8, the older brother, serious and protective. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's careful nature. He loved building with Legos and teaching his little sister to tie her shoes even when she grew frustrated. Samantha was 5, bright, curious, and full of energy. Laura kept her blonde hair in pigtails most days. Her green eyes lit up when she laughed, and she had a distinctive birthmark on her left cheek just below her eye, dark brown and about the size of a dime. She followed Jake everywhere, asked questions about everything from why clouds moved to where birds went at night. Her preschool teachers described her as sweet and friendly, the first to share toys and help clean up. The Miller family had routines that held them together. Pancakes every Sunday morning after church. Movie night every Friday with popcorn Laura made on the stove. Bedtime stories every single night. Our community in Ridgemont believed in taking care of each other, in trusting neighbors, in letting kids be kids. Parents didn't worry much because everyone watched out for everyone's children. Playgrounds were safe spaces. Saturday mornings were for families. Children could chase balls without disappearing. Laura had a close friend who understood this kind of life even though she'd moved away years ago. Diana Parker had grown up in Ridgemont, had been Laura's best friend since high school. They'd been inseparable back then, had talked about raising their children together. But Diana had moved to Lexington, Kentucky about 6 years earlier for work. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep, traveled often, made good money. She'd married and divorced within 3 years, no children. She tried, had gone through treatments, but nothing worked. Diana visited Ridgemont a few times a year, always stayed with Laura and David, always brought presents for the kids. She doted on Samantha especially, said she had the sweetest personality of any child she'd ever met. On Monday, July 20th, 1998, Diana drove up from Kentucky for a visit. She pulled into the Miller driveway around dinnertime with shopping bags full of gifts. They spent 3 easy days together. Diana and Laura took the kids to the pool, went shopping, stayed up late talking. Diana played endless rounds of Candyland with Samantha, helped Jake build an elaborate Lego spaceship, felt like part of the family in a way that made the absence of her own children hurt a little less. On Thursday morning, July 23rd, Diana packed her bags and loaded her car while Samantha clung to her leg, crying. Diana knelt down, wiped the tears away, promised to visit again soon. Laura walked Diana to the car, hugged her tight, hated when she left because the house always felt empty after. Diana's eyes grew wet. She hugged Laura again, got in her car, waved at the family standing in the yard, and drove away down Oak Street until she disappeared around the corner. If you've ever had a friend who feels more like family, who knows your history and your heart, you understand why Laura felt the loss every time Diana left. Distance changes friendships, but it doesn't erase the bond that comes from growing up together in a small town where everyone knows your name. Friday was routine. Laura worked a shift at the hospital. David picked the kids up from the neighbor. They had spaghetti for dinner, watched a movie, went to bed. Saturday morning dawned hot and humid. The kind of July day in Indiana where the air felt thick. By 10 o'clock, the temperature was already pushing 90 degrees. Laura decided to take the kids to Ridgemont Community Park. It had shade trees, playground equipment, a picnic area. Better than staying inside all day. She packed sandwiches, juice boxes, sunscreen. They drove the 6 blocks to the park even though they could have walked because Laura didn't want to arrive already sweating. The park was busy but not crowded. A few families at picnic tables, some kids on the swings, teenagers playing basketball at the far end. Laura chose a table under a big oak tree, told the kids they could play until lunch was ready in 20 minutes. Jake ran toward the basketball court. Samantha headed for the playground equipment, climbed onto the jungle gym, made her way across the monkey bars. Laura watched while she arranged sandwiches on paper plates. The park felt safe, familiar. She'd been bringing the kids here since Jake was a toddler. Samantha gave up on the monkey bars, went to the swings, pumped her legs trying to go higher. A ball rolled past her from where some boys were playing catch. She jumped off mid-swing, landed hard, laughed, chased after it. The ball had rolled towards the edge of the playground where a cluster of trees marked the boundary between the park and the wooded area beyond. Not deep woods, just a thin line of trees maybe 30 feet wide. Then a street on the other side. Kids played in there sometimes, used the trees for fort building. Nothing dangerous. Laura could see the trees from the picnic table. Samantha ran after the ball, disappeared into the shade. Laura turned back to the sandwiches, called out that lunch was almost ready. No answer, but that wasn't unusual. Samantha got focused on things, didn't always hear. Laura finished setting out the food, poured juice into cups, checked her watch, almost 11:30. She called Jake over from the basketball court, asked him to get his sister. Jake jogged toward the trees, called for Samantha, came back alone. Laura felt the first flutter of concern. She walked quickly toward the trees, calling Samantha's name. She reached the edge of the wooded area, looked around. The ball sat on the ground between 2 trees, but no Samantha. Laura's heart started beating faster. She walked into the trees, looking behind trunks, expecting to find her daughter crouched down playing with something. The trees weren't dense. Laura could see clear through to the street on the other side. No little girl in a pink shirt. She came back out to the playground, looked around frantically, checked the swings, the slide, the jungle gym, asked the boys playing catch if they'd seen where the little girl went. They shook their heads. One said he'd seen her chase the ball but hadn't paid attention after. Laura ran back to Jake, who stood by the picnic table looking scared. Told him to stay there, circled the entire park, calling Samantha's name. Checked the bathrooms, the parking lot, everywhere. Other parents started noticing, started asking if something was wrong. Nobody had seen her. If you've ever felt the moment when concern turns to real fear, when your brain starts offering terrible possibilities you can't push away, you know what Laura Miller felt standing in that park searching for a child who'd been right there minutes ago. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911 with shaking hands. Within 10 minutes, 2 Ridgemont police cars pulled into the park. Chief Mark Sullivan got out, a man in his late 50s who'd known Laura since she was a kid. Laura's voice shook as she explained. They'd arrived around 11. Samantha had been playing. A ball rolled into the trees. Samantha went to get it. Laura was setting up lunch. Minutes later, she was gone. Sullivan asked how long between when Samantha went into the trees and when Laura realized she was missing. Laura said maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. Sullivan radioed for more officers, for volunteers, for every resource available. Within 20 minutes, the search was organized. Officers walked the wooded area. Volunteers spread through the park calling Samantha's name. They checked every building, every car, every possible hiding spot. Nobody found her. Sullivan asked Laura if anyone had been paying unusual attention to Samantha, if anyone might have reason to take her. Laura shook her head. Nobody. Everyone loved Samantha. By 1 o'clock, the FBI had been called. A 5-year-old missing for over an hour was treated as an abduction. By 2 o'clock, Roadblocks were set up on every road out of Ridgemont. By 3 o'clock, Samantha had been missing for 4 hours. The temperature had climbed past 95 degrees, and Laura Miller sat in her living room with David, who'd raced home from work, both being questioned by FBI agents. By evening, Samantha Miller's face was on every TV screen in Indiana. 5 years old, blonde hair, green eyes, distinctive birthmark on left cheek. Last seen wearing pink shirt and denim shorts at Ridgemont Community Park. The tips started coming in. Someone thought they'd seen a blonde girl at a rest stop. Someone else thought they'd seen a man carrying a child. Every lead was checked. None led to Samantha. FBI agents interviewed everyone at the park that morning. Families, teenagers, the ice cream truck driver. Did you see the little girl? Did you see anyone talking to her? One name came up more than once. Carl Jensen. Carl Jensen was 45, lived alone 3 blocks from the park. He was there that morning, same as most mornings. He walked there to feed ducks, to photograph birds with expensive camera equipment. He spent hours on benches waiting for the right shot. People said he was there a lot. Said he watched children sometimes. Said there was something off about a middle-aged man who spent that much time alone at a park. Someone mentioned Carl had been accused of something years ago, something involving a child. The charges had been dropped. He'd been cleared, but people remembered. Saturday evening, police brought Carl Jensen in for questioning. He sat in the interrogation room looking confused and frightened. Said yes, he'd been at the park that morning. He went there often to photograph birds. It was his hobby. They asked if he'd seen Samantha Miller. He said he'd seen lots of children. He didn't pay attention to specific kids. He was there for the birds. They asked about the previous accusation. Carl's face went red. He said that had been a misunderstanding. A student's parents angry about a grade. He'd been a high school biology teacher for 20 years before retiring early because of the false accusation. Police had investigated. The prosecutor declined to file charges. The family eventually admitted their daughter made it up. But the damage was done. Carl had retired, stopped teaching, spent his time alone because the town never quite forgave him. The interview lasted 3 hours. Carl agreed to let them search his house, his car, his computer. The search found camera equipment, bird photography books, a quiet life lived alone. No evidence of Samantha Miller, no evidence of any child. But the town had decided. By Sunday morning, word had spread. Carl Jensen had been at the park. Carl Jensen had been accused before. Carl Jensen lived alone and spent too much time watching children. If you've ever wanted someone to blame when the world stops making sense, when fear needs a target and facts don't matter as much as the need for answers, you know why Ridgemont turned on Carl Jensen so fast. Someone spray-painted "child stealer" on his garage. Someone threw a brick through his window. His phone rang with anonymous threats. Laura saw the news coverage, saw Carl's face on TV, and felt sick with hope and rage mixed together. She wanted it to be him because then they'd know who took Samantha. But she also felt doubt because she'd seen Carl at the park before, had never thought twice about him. David said it had to be him. Who else? Some stranger passing through? That didn't make sense. FBI agents told the Millers that Carl Jensen's alibi was shaky, but his house was clean. They were still investigating, but didn't have enough to charge him. Sunday evening, Laura called Diana in Kentucky. Needed to hear her friend's voice. Needed someone who understood. Diana answered on the second ring, asked what was wrong. Laura broke down. Could barely get the words out. Samantha was gone. Someone took her from the park. They couldn't find her. There was silence on the other end. Then Diana's voice, shocked and broken, asking what happened. Laura explained through sobs. The park, the ball, turning around for just minutes. Samantha disappearing. Diana kept saying she couldn't believe it. Her voice sounded wrecked. She asked if police had leads. Laura told her about Carl Jensen, about the search, about how nobody knew anything. Diana said she wanted to come, wanted to be there, but work had a critical project. Her boss wouldn't let her leave right now. She felt terrible, but couldn't abandon everything. Laura said she understood. Just hearing Diana's voice helped. Diana promised to call every day, to come as soon as she could get away. She said she was praying, thinking about Samantha every minute. They talked for an hour. Diana cried with Laura, said all the right things, promised to be there soon. When they hung up, Laura felt marginally less alone. And somewhere in a place Laura couldn't imagine, Samantha Miller was waking up confused and scared, wondering why her mama hadn't come yet. The first 48 hours after Samantha Miller disappeared felt like 48 years to Laura and David. They didn't sleep, didn't eat, couldn't sit still for more than a few minutes before jumping up to check the phone or look out the window, hoping their daughter would somehow appear. By Monday morning, the case had spread beyond Ridgemont. News vans from Indianapolis and Fort Wayne parked on Oak Street. Reporters knocked on doors asking neighbors what they knew about the missing girl, about the man being questioned, about whether this quiet town had been hiding something dark all along. Laura refused to talk to the media. She stayed inside, curtains drawn, staring at Samantha's empty chair at the kitchen table. Every hour that passed without news felt like another piece of her heart breaking off. David handled the press because someone had to. He stood on the front porch Monday afternoon, cameras pointed at his face, and read from a statement he'd written at 3 a.m. when sleep refused to come. He said Samantha was a good kid, that she was trusting and sweet and loved everyone. He said someone had taken advantage of that trust. He begged whoever had her to bring her home. Please, she's just 5 years old. His voice cracked on the last sentence and the cameras caught it. That clip would play on the evening news for days. A father breaking down, begging for his daughter's life. Our community of families dealing with missing loved ones knows that the first 48 hours are critical. That every minute counts when someone vanishes without a trace. And in those first hours, Ridgemont came together in ways small towns do when tragedy strikes. The Methodist Church became a command center. Volunteers brought coffee and sandwiches. Someone set up a phone bank to handle tips. Samantha's photo was everywhere. On telephone poles, in store windows, handed out at gas stations along every highway. Jake stayed with Laura's sister those first few days. He was too young to understand everything, but old enough to know his little sister was gone. He kept asking when Samantha was coming home. Nobody had an answer. FBI lead agent Rebecca Walsh arrived from Indianapolis on Monday. She sat with Laura and David at their kitchen table and asked the hard questions. Had they noticed anyone showing unusual interest in Samantha? Any strangers hanging around? Anyone who might have known their routine? Both parents shook their heads. Nothing. Everything had been normal until it wasn't. Walsh asked about the park, about who else had been there. Laura mentioned Carl Jensen, said he was there often photographing birds, that other parents had pointed him out. Walsh asked if Carl had ever approached Samantha or made Laura uncomfortable. Laura said, "No, never." She'd seen him around for years, had never thought twice about him. But Carl Jensen was already the primary suspect. His name had come up too many times in witness interviews. His past accusation made him an easy target, and his alibi had holes. He claimed he'd left the park around 11 o'clock before Samantha disappeared, but nobody could confirm exactly when he'd left. The timing was close enough to be suspicious. On Monday evening, FBI searched Carl's property more thoroughly. They brought dogs, ground-penetrating radar, everything. They tore through his yard, his shed, his garage. They found nothing. Tuesday morning, Carl was released. FBI didn't have enough to hold him. His house was clean. His computer showed no concerning searches. And the evidence against him was purely circumstantial. But the town didn't care about evidence. By Tuesday afternoon, Carl Jensen's life was destroyed. Someone broke into his house and trashed it. Someone left a dead animal on his porch. His elderly mother, who lived 2 towns over, started getting threatening calls. Carl's lawyer held a press conference Tuesday evening, said Carl was innocent, said the real perpetrator was still out there while the town wasted time persecuting an innocent man. The town didn't believe it. Laura watched the press conference and felt her stomach twist. She wanted Carl to be guilty because then they'd have answers. But something nagged at her. If Carl had taken Samantha, where was she? Why hadn't they found any evidence after searching his entire property? David said Carl probably had help. Probably had somewhere else he was keeping her. Said the FBI would figure it out. But days passed and the FBI didn't figure it out. The case started going cold almost immediately. On Thursday, 5 days after Samantha disappeared, Diana Parker showed up at the Miller house. She'd driven straight from Kentucky, arrived around dinner time with red eyes and a broken expression. Laura opened the door and collapsed into her arms. Diana held her, both of them crying on the front porch while David watched from inside. Diana stayed for 3 days. She sat with Laura for hours, made food nobody ate, answered the phone when reporters called, shielded the family from everything she could. She went through photo albums with Laura, looked at pictures of Samantha, cried alongside her best friend. On Sunday, Diana had to leave. Work was calling. She'd already pushed back as much as she could. She hugged Laura tight, promised to call every day, to come back whenever Laura needed her. The weeks that followed were brutal. The FBI kept working, but leads dried up fast. No ransom demands, no sightings, no body found. Samantha had simply vanished. Carl Jensen left Ridgemont in August. His mother came and helped him pack. They loaded everything into a U-Haul in the middle of the night and drove away before dawn. Nobody knew where he went, and nobody cared. The town felt relief when he left. Felt like justice even though he'd never been charged with anything. If you've ever watched an innocent person's life get destroyed because fear needed a target, you know the specific cruelty of what happened to Carl Jensen in the summer of 1998. Laura quit her job at the hospital in September. She couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except Samantha. The house felt like a tomb without her daughter's laughter filling it. David kept working because bills didn't stop coming. But his heart wasn't in it. They kept Samantha's room exactly as she'd left it. Her toys scattered on the floor from that Friday night before the park. Her bed unmade. Her favorite stuffed rabbit sitting on the pillow. Jake came home from his aunt's house in October. He was quieter now, didn't laugh as much. He'd lost his little sister and part of his childhood. The years crawled forward slowly, painfully. Laura and David's marriage strained under grief that grew heavier with time. They loved each other, but love wasn't enough to fill the space Samantha had left behind. They stopped celebrating holidays after that first year. Couldn't bear birthdays or Christmas or any of the markers that reminded them Samantha should be there too. But Laura couldn't let go completely. Every year on Samantha's birthday, July 14th, she baked a cake, set it on the kitchen table, lit candles, sang happy birthday to an empty room. David would find her there hours later sitting in the dark. The candles burned down to nothing. Every Christmas, Laura bought Samantha a present, wrapped it carefully, age-appropriate gifts for the daughter who was growing up somewhere without her. A bike for a 7-year-old, roller skates for an 8-year-old, books for a 10-year-old. David thought she needed to accept that Samantha was probably gone. Laura thought she needed to hold on to hope even when hope hurt. The distance between them grew wider every year. Diana called regularly at first every few days, then every week, checking on Laura, asking if there was any news. She visited a few times that first year, came for weekends, sat with Laura, reminded her she wasn't alone. But by the second year, the calls became less frequent. Once a month, then every few months. Diana had her own life in Kentucky, her own problems. Work was demanding. She'd started dating someone new. She was trying to move forward even as Laura remained stuck. By the third year, they talked maybe 4 or 5 times total. Birthdays, Christmas, the anniversary of Samantha's disappearance. The conversations were shorter, more strained. What was there to say after 3 years of no news? By the 5th year, the friendship had faded to occasional text messages. Diana had moved to a different city, had a different job, lived a life that didn't include regular drives to Ridgemont. Laura felt like she'd lost Diana too. Lost her daughter and her best friend in the span of a few years. Jake graduated high school in 2006, left for college in Illinois, said he loved his parents but couldn't stay in that house anymore. Couldn't live in a museum dedicated to his missing sister. By 2009, Laura was 40, her hair more gray than brown now. David was 42, moved slower, looked older than his years. They still lived in the yellow house on Oak Street. Still kept Samantha's room exactly as it had been 11 years ago. The case was cold, ice cold. The FBI had moved on to other missing children. The Ridgemont Police Department had a new chief who reviewed Samantha's file once a year and found nothing new. Most people in Ridgemont had stopped thinking about Samantha Miller. The case had become local legend. The girl who vanished from the park, the mystery that was never solved. But Laura never stopped. She'd started a small support group from her living room in 2003. Other parents who'd lost children who understood the hell of not knowing. She printed new flyers every few months, age-progressed photos showing what Samantha might look like now, 16 years old, a teenager Laura had never met. She'd drive to neighboring towns, tape flyers to bulletin boards, hand them to strangers. Most people glanced and moved on. Nobody ever called with real information. And 300 miles away in Lexington, Kentucky, Samantha Miller was living with the only mother she could remember. She was 16 now, a junior in high school. She had blonde hair she wore long now, green eyes that didn't sparkle quite the way they used to, that distinctive birthmark on her left cheek that she'd learned to hide with makeup. She went by Emily Walsh, had gone by that name for so long that Samantha felt like someone else, like a story she'd heard once but couldn't quite remember. Diana had told her the story many times, how her real mother had been too young, too unprepared, how she'd asked Diana to take Emily because she couldn't raise her, how it was an act of love, not abandonment. Emily believed it because what choice did she have? She'd been 5 years old when Diana became her mother. Her memories from before were fuzzy fragments, a boy who might have been a brother, a yellow house, a park. Nothing concrete enough to contradict what Diana told her. Diana had homeschooled her until 8th grade, said public school wasn't safe, that people would judge them, that it was better to learn at home. When Emily started high school, she was so far behind socially. She didn't know how to make friends. She went to school, came home, did homework, ate dinner with Diana. That was her life. Quiet, controlled, safe in a way that felt more like a cage. But cracks were starting to show, small ones at first. Diana's hands shaking when news showed missing children's stories. Her sharp voice when Emily asked too many questions about her childhood. The way she tensed when police cars drove past. Emily had started to wonder, started to feel like something wasn't right. But wondering felt dangerous. Questioning felt like betrayal. She didn't know that 300 miles away, a woman was wrapping a present for her. A simple journal with a lock and key, age-appropriate for 16, wrapped in paper covered with butterflies. She didn't know that in 2 months a man named Ryan Mitchell would be having lunch at a cafe in Lexington and would notice something that would change everything. Because in October 2009, Ryan Mitchell sat down at Beckett's Cafe on Main Street for his usual Tuesday lunch. He was a nurse, 32 years old, worked at a hospital in Indianapolis but had come to Lexington for a medical conference. He ordered a sandwich, pulled out his laptop, started working while he ate. At the table next to him, a teenage girl sat alone with textbooks spread out, studying for what looked like a chemistry test. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wore jeans and a green sweater, looked like any other high school student trying to get homework done. Ryan wouldn't have paid attention except that she reached up to tuck hair behind her ear and he saw it. A distinctive birthmark on her left cheek just below her eye. Dark brown, about the size of a dime. Something about it felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. He went back to his work, finished lunch, drove back to Indianapolis, thinking nothing of it. 3 days later, Ryan was driving home from the conference, flipping through radio stations, when he landed on a public radio program doing a segment called Forgotten Cases. The host was talking about cold missing children cases, about how age-progressed photos could be misleading, but physical markers like scars and birthmarks remained the most reliable identifiers. She mentioned a case from Indiana. Samantha Miller, missing since 1998 from Ridgemont, 5 years old when she disappeared from a park. Would be 16 now. Blonde hair, green eyes, distinctive birthmark on her left cheek. Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The girl at the cafe, the birthmark in the exact same place. He told himself it was coincidence. Lots of people had birthmarks. It didn't mean anything, but he couldn't shake it. That night, he searched online for Samantha Miller. Found old news articles. found the age-progressed photos the FBI had released. The face was similar to the girl at the cafe. Not exact, but similar enough to make his stomach twist. He told himself he was wrong, that he was seeing connections that weren't there, that reporting it would waste everyone's time. But the next morning, he called the FBI tip line anyway because what if he was right? What if that girl was Samantha Miller and he did nothing? He explained to the operator that he'd heard the radio program, that he'd seen a girl in Lexington, Kentucky with a birthmark that matched, that it was probably nothing but he couldn't stop thinking about it. The operator thanked him, said they'd follow up, asked for his contact information. Ryan hung up, feeling foolish, like he'd just wasted FBI time on a hunch that didn't make sense. But in Indianapolis, FBI agent Rebecca Walsh got the tip 3 hours later. She'd worked Samantha Miller's case in 1998, had never stopped checking the file. Most tips were nothing. Parents seeing their missing children in every blonde girl. People looking for reward money. But this tip was different. Specific location. Specific physical marker from someone who didn't even realize what he'd seen until days later. Walsh pulled Samantha's file, looked at the birthmark notation, left cheek, below eye, approximately 1 centimeter diameter, dark brown. She made a call to the FBI office in Louisville, asked them to quietly investigate a teenager in Lexington named Emily Walsh. No approach yet, just observation, see if the birthmark matched. 2 weeks later, photos came back. A teenage girl leaving school, getting into a car with a woman in her late 40s. The girl's face partially visible. And there on her left cheek, exactly where it should be, was the birthmark. Rebecca Walsh stared at the photo for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and called the Millers. Laura answered on the third ring like she always did, hoping for news that never came. Walsh said her name, and Laura knew from her tone that something had changed. Mrs. Miller, we may have found Samantha. October 28, 2009. 11 years, 3 months, and 3 days after Samantha Miller disappeared from a park in Ridgemont, Indiana, FBI agent Rebecca Walsh stood outside a modest 2-story house in Lexington, Kentucky, with a tactical team behind her and a warrant in her hand. The surveillance had taken 2 weeks, watching the house, documenting the woman who lived there with the teenage girl, running background checks, pulling records, building a case that wouldn't fall apart in court. The woman's name was Diana Parker, age 49, pharmaceutical sales rep. No criminal record, no red flags except for one detail that made Walsh's blood run cold when she found it. Diana Parker had grown up in Ridgemont, Indiana, had been Laura Miller's best friend, had visited the Miller house the week before Samantha disappeared. Walsh knocked on the door at 6 o'clock in the morning. Loud, official, the kind of knock that says, "This isn't a request." A woman opened it, still in her bathrobe, confusion turning to fear when she saw the badges. Walsh held up her credentials and the warrant. "Diana Parker, we need to talk about Emily Walsh." Diana's face went white. Her hand gripped the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about. We need to come in now." Diana stepped aside. The team moved through the house quickly, securing rooms, making sure nobody ran. Walsh found the girl upstairs in her bedroom, still asleep. Blonde hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful, unaware that her entire world was about to shatter. Walsh touched her shoulder gently. "Emily, I need you to wake up." The girl's eyes opened slowly, focused on Walsh's badge, went wide. "What's happening? Where's my mom?" Walsh kept her voice calm. "Your mom is downstairs. I need you to come with me. You're not in trouble, but we need to talk to you." Emily sat up, pulled a sweatshirt over her pajamas, followed Walsh downstairs on shaking legs. Diana was sitting on the couch, 2 agents standing nearby. When she saw Emily, tears started falling. Walsh sat down across from them. "Emily, I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard the name Samantha Miller?" Emily looked confused. "No, I don't think so. Why?" Walsh pulled out a photo, old from 1998. A 5-year-old girl with blonde pigtails and green eyes smiling at the camera. The birthmark clearly visible on her left cheek. "Do you recognize this girl?" Emily stared at the photo for a long time. Something flickered in her eyes, a memory trying to surface. She looks like me when I was little. This is Samantha Miller. She disappeared from a park in Ridgemont, Indiana on July 25, 1998. She was 5 years old. Emily shook her head. I don't understand. That's not me. My name is Emily Walsh. Walsh looked at Diana. Want to tell her the truth, or should I? Diana's face crumpled. She reached for Emily's hand, but Emily pulled away. Tell me what? What's she talking about? Walsh kept her voice gentle. Emily, we have reason to believe you are Samantha Miller, that you were taken from that park 11 years ago, that Diana Parker is not your biological mother. The room went silent except for Diana's quiet sobbing. Emily looked between Walsh and Diana, her entire world tilting. No, that's not true. My mom told me my real mother couldn't take care of me, that she gave me to Diana. Walsh shook her head. Your real mother never gave you up. Laura and David Miller have been searching for you for 11 years. They never stopped looking. Emily stood up fast, backing away from both of them. You're lying. This is a mistake. Diana is my mother. She raised me. She wouldn't lie about that. She looked at Diana, desperate for confirmation. Tell them it's not true. Diana couldn't speak, could only cry. Walsh said quietly, Diana grew up with your real mother. They were best friends. Diana visited your house the week before you disappeared. She knew the park you played at. She knew your routine. Emily's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the stairs, her hands shaking. You took me. You stole me from my real parents. Diana finally found her voice. I saved you. I gave you a better life. Laura was struggling. David was always working. I could give you everything they couldn't. Walsh's expression hardened. You kidnapped a 5-year-old child from a public park. You destroyed a family. You let an innocent man's life get ruined while you played house with someone else's daughter. Emily was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face while her mind tried to process what was happening. Walsh asked if she remembered anything from before, anything from when she was 5. Emily said her memories were fuzzy fragments. A boy, a yellow house, pancakes, a park. Nothing solid. Walsh said those memories were real, that Jake was her brother, that the yellow house was where she'd lived, that Laura made pancakes every Sunday morning. Emily looked at Diana with betrayed eyes. Everything you told me was a lie. Diana reached for her again. I loved you. I gave you a good life. That wasn't a lie. You stole me. FBI agents took Diana into custody, read her rights while she kept saying she was sorry, that she'd only wanted to be a mother, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone. Emily sat on the stairs watching the woman she'd called mom for 11 years get handcuffed and led away. An FBI counselor sat with Emily while agents searched the house. They found documents Diana had used to create Emily's identity. Fake birth certificate purchased through a document forger. Fake medical records. An entire false life built on top of a kidnapping. They found journals. Diana had kept detailed entries about watching Samantha through the Miller's windows during visits, about planning the abduction, about arriving at the park that Saturday morning with a plan. The journals described how Diana had waited in the trees, how Samantha had chased the ball right to her, how Diana had said Laura sent her to bring Samantha home, how Samantha had trusted her because she was Diana, her mother's best friend. Diana had driven straight to Kentucky that day, had already rented a house under a fake name, had already prepared everything needed to disappear with a child. The journals described the first weeks, how Samantha had cried for her mama, how Diana had told her over and over that Laura couldn't take care of her anymore, that Diana was her mother now, that everything would be okay, how eventually after months of isolation and manipulation, Samantha had stopped asking about Laura, had started calling Diana mom, had forgotten most of her life before. Walsh read the journals with disgust. Then she made the call she'd been waiting 11 years to make. Laura Miller answered on the first ring. Mrs. Miller, this is Agent Rebecca Walsh. We found Samantha. She's alive. We're bringing her home. Laura dropped the phone. Her scream brought David running from the other room. He picked up the phone, listened while Walsh explained. Diana Parker had taken Samantha, had been raising her in Kentucky as Emily Walsh. They'd arrested Diana that morning. Samantha was safe. David couldn't speak, could only nod even though Walsh couldn't see him. After 11 years of grief, their daughter was coming home. Walsh said they could come to Lexington or they could wait for Samantha to be brought to them. That it was their choice. Laura grabbed the phone, said they were coming now. They'd drive through the night if they had to. They were in the car within 20 minutes. Called Jake from the road. He was in class at University of Illinois when his phone rang. Jake, they found her. They found Samantha. Jake had to pull over because he couldn't see through the tears. The drive to Lexington took 6 hours. Laura couldn't stop shaking the entire way. David drove with both hands gripping the wheel, hardly believing this was real. When they walked into the FBI office and Agent Walsh led them to a private room, Laura knew it was true. Samantha sat on a couch wrapped in a blanket. She was 16 now, so much older than the 5-year-old they'd lost, taller with long blonde hair and that same birthmark on her cheek. But it was her. It was their baby. Laura crossed the room, knelt in front of her daughter, reached up with shaking hands to touch her face. Samantha. The girl looked at her with confused, weary eyes. They say that's my name, but I don't remember you. Laura's voice broke. That's okay. We have time now. All the time in the world. She asked if she could hug her daughter. Samantha hesitated, then nodded. Laura pulled her close and cried into her hair. Cried for 4,118 days of missing her, of searching, of hoping against hope that this moment would come. Samantha didn't hug back at first. These people were strangers, even if they claimed to be her parents. 11 years was a long time to forget. But slowly, something shifted. The smell of her mother's perfume triggered something deep. A feeling more than a memory, of safety, of being held by someone who loved her before she could remember. David stood in the doorway crying. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality was overwhelming in ways imagination couldn't prepare for. He sat down beside Laura, put his hand on Samantha's shoulder. I'm so sorry we didn't protect you. I'm so sorry it took us this long. Samantha looked at him and a fragment surfaced. A man with kind eyes teaching her to ride a bike. Pancakes on Sunday. You made pancakes? She whispered. David's voice broke. Every Sunday. With chocolate chips. Just for you. Our community knows that justice doesn't erase the years lost or the trauma endured, but it provides closure, a line between past and future. Diana Parker was charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, identity fraud, and obstruction of justice. The trial was held 6 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. The journals detailing her plan. Witness testimony from people who'd seen her in Ridgemont that week. Samantha's testimony about 11 years of being told her real parents hadn't wanted her. The jury took 90 minutes to convict. Diana got life in prison without possibility of parole. The judge's words at sentencing were harsh. He said she'd stolen 11 years from Samantha Miller, destroyed her childhood, manipulated her into believing a lie, caused immeasurable pain to a family that had trusted her. And she destroyed Carl Jensen's life by letting an innocent man take the blame while she played mother with someone else's child. Carl Jensen, who'd left Ridgemont in shame in 1998, received a formal apology from the FBI and the Ridgemont Police Department. They tracked him down in Oregon, where he'd been living quietly under a different name, offered a settlement. Carl accepted it and donated half to organizations helping wrongfully accused people. When reporters asked how he felt, he said he was glad Samantha had been found, but sad that it took 11 years. That a little girl had spent her entire adolescence stolen because one person couldn't accept she couldn't have children. He said he'd never go back to Ridgemont, that the town had taught him how quickly fear could destroy innocent lives. Samantha's recovery was slow and painful. She moved back to Ridgemont with Laura and David into the house on Oak Street that she didn't remember. Her old room had been kept exactly as she'd left it. Toys from 1998. Posters of shows she'd been too young to remember. A time capsule of a childhood interrupted. The first months were the hardest. Her memories came back in pieces that didn't fit together. She'd remember Jake reading to her at bedtime. Then nothing until she remembered Diana. The two lives overlapped and contradicted. Jake came home from college, took a semester off. They sat in her room for hours looking at photo albums, talking about memories Samantha couldn't reach. Laura and David got her into therapy with a specialist who understood trauma and long-term manipulation. They learned her triggers, her patterns, how to support her. Slowly, over months and years, Samantha started to heal. She finished high school online, started community college, began volunteering at a center for missing children. She wrote a book about her experience when she was 22. On the dedication page, she wrote, "To Mom and Dad who never stopped looking, to Jake who never forgot me, to Ryan Mitchell who paid attention, and to Carl Jensen, whose life was destroyed by a lie." Laura's support group grew. She helped dozens of families navigate the nightmare she'd lived through. David went back to work with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. The Miller family never forgot the 11 years they'd lost, but they didn't let those years define the rest of their lives. They celebrated Samantha's 18th birthday together a year after she came home. All four of them crowded around a cake. Laura cried happy tears for the first time in over a decade. Samantha looked at her family, these people who'd refused to give up even when the entire world said to, and felt something she hadn't felt in 11 years. She felt like she was home. Really, truly home. If this story reminded you that hope never dies, that truth always surfaces, remember this. Somewhere out there, another person is still waiting to be found. Another family is still searching. Pay attention to the small signs. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Believe in the possibility that missing doesn't always mean gone forever. Because Samantha Miller was saved by a man who noticed a birthmark, by an FBI agent who remembered a case, and by parents who refused to believe their daughter was lost forever. The truth always surfaces. Sometimes it just takes 11 years and one person paying attention at exactly the right moment.